Hello and welcome to a development log on a first-person shooter. I'm making an Unreal 4. This is the first-person shooter template in Blueprints that I have made some changes to sort of make it a little bit of my own. I have plans to go further, but here in this video, I just want to set a baseline of what I've done. Um, so going forward, any changes I make, I can put in more incremental videos. So you can see here, I've changed the gun. It is now this model that I found on the online. You can aim down sights. You can hold down the fire button and just fire automatically, so it's kind of an auto rifle. The other major thing is that there's some AI. So this AI kind of runs around, and if I get into range, it will start shooting at me. Uh, so you see him start shooting at me, my health is going down, and now I am dead. And that's just about it. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to show how I made the changes I made, mainly to the player that I am, which is the adding the new gun, retargeting some animations so it looks, I mean, these animations still need some work, but how we can do that, adding the health, adding the automatic firing, adding some animations. You can see this is kind of a very simple animation I intend to use for reloading. And then after that, we'll go over this AI and how I did it, the behavior tree, what the blackboard is, the behavior blueprint, and I've also retargeted an animation in order to make this hold this gun, which as you can see is the same gun I have. That gun holding animation is nothing standard, so I'll show you how I did that as well. And that's going to be coming up in the next couple of videos, so stay tuned. So the next part I'm going to talk about is the third-person enemy character that you see here. I spawn in, he runs around, he points a gun and shoots me, and that decreases my life. The first part to get into is just how did I get this model into this project. This third-person mannequin is not part of the first-person shooter template. It was pretty simple because he's already in the third-person Unreal setup. All you have to do is migrate that into a first-person shooter project, and the process for migrating assets is literally just finding it in your content browser, right-clicking it, clicking migrate. This will pull everything in there and all assets that are in there and all assets that are dependent on, like all assets, all its dependencies basically. And so you'll make sure that no matter everything that you grab, everything that it needs to work will come along for the ride. So you would click OK, you go to Unreal Projects, click whichever one you want and stick it in there. So basically you make a burner, I made a burner third person project just to get this blueprint and all these assets and just stuck them in there. And that came with no AI, but it gave me all the animations that I was going to have to work with and was just, was the decent baseline to work with. And so that was kind of the first step. Okay, next thing to cover with this character is setting up the animation. The character came with a couple of animations, as well as something called an animation blueprint, as well as an animation blend space. The animations it came with are great for a character running around, but none of them have any facility for a character holding a gun. So I need to do some editing to an animation in order to make that happen. First, let's go over what the animation blueprint and blend space are. The animation blueprint essentially sets logic not for driving the behavior of the character, but for driving the behavior of how the animations will transition to one another. So see you have here two variables. One is in air, and the other one is speed. Those are pretty self-explanatory. We'll just go through the logic really quickly here, though. Event blueprint update animation is like the starting of figuring out these values every time you want to update the animation or the engine calls for the animation to be updated. Set is in air, just gets the moving component and seizes it falling down. The logic there being if you're moving vertically, you're probably falling. And since the jumping up and falling down animation is the same, this is really all you need. And then setting speed, which will gets into the one-dimensional blend space, whatever I'll explain what that is. That is just determining that is the velocity of the character at the time. So the character controller will determine, which is then driven by the AI, but we'll get there. That determines how fast the character is moving, and based on that, we will change the animation. So if it's moving at a certain pace, it will, like a very slow pace, it will kind of do a walking animation. And then as it moves faster and faster, it kind of blends that animation kind of smoothly into a running animation, which it also provides. So that was the event graph, and the event graph is what sets these variables that we're going to use to determine how the animations should transition. Now in the anim graph, we are going to determine, that's going to use those variables to determine what animation to use. So we had to have this information, now we need to use it. And this looks pretty simple. This is a state machine called default going into a final animation pose. Basically, the state machine will determine what animation to use. That will just funnel right back into this final animation pose, which will be the final pose. Whatever comes out of the state machine, that'll be the final animation that the character is playing. Your rigged mesh, your skeletal mesh is playing. So let's look at the state machine. This is exactly how it appears in the third-person template. Like, I haven't touched this at all from how it appears in the third-person template. I'm just going over real quickly. Idle run state is using this one-dimensional blend space, which I'll get into, that gets fed an input parameter of speed, and that produces final animation pose. And that is the first state from the entry. Then if is in air is true, basically it's just a very simple logic is in air that we got from the event graph. If that is true, then we transition into the jump start state. And jump start will then get the third person jump start animation, which is its own animation. Then we can transition into the jump loop. That transition is based on how much time is left in the jump start animation asset. When there is less than a tenth of a second left, as you can see here, it will transition into the jump loop. Then in jump loop, that is just the jump. There's a separate jump loop animation that is what gets played for that state. Then transitioning away from the jump loop, we see is not in air. So once this is in air is set back to false as well. So once is in air is set to false, and you have less than a tenth of a second left in the jump start, you will go straight into this state, which is just the third person jump. So that is 3 different jump animations. There's jump start, there's jump loop, and then there's just jump, the jump is just at the very end, interestingly enough. Then from the jump end, which you'd say, shouldn't you be playing the idle run, idle/run state once you get to the end of the jump? Well, we get there by saying once the jump the jump animation is in the last tenth of a second, then we can transition back to idle run and back to this blend space. And that is the highest level anim. That is the default state machine. Now you could have multiple different state machines in your animation blueprint, but for the way this comes and for our purposes, we don't need anything more than this. This is fine. We could do things with animation blending and slots, and if I was getting fancier and instead of a bigger project, I would do that, but this is just how it kind of comes, and I'm just sort of working with it as it is. So now we're going to get into, the blend space.